ראשון שומר ישראל, אדוני שומרך, אדוני צילך על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. אדוני ישמרך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמר צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם.
In times of mourning and loss, we turn to the words of our tradition and seek comfort within them. The words of the psalmist, literally of thousands of years, that have brought comfort and reminded us of the values of a life well lived. And so, as we honor Jerry, so is it these words that help us in these difficult times, as the cantor sang. Adonai ma'adam v'direhu ben enosh v'techashvehu. What are we, God, that you have regard for us? What are we that you're mindful of us? We're like a breath. Our days are as a passing shadow. We come and go like grass. In the morning shoots up renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. You cause us to revert to dust, saying, return, O mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. When we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted, behold the upright, they shall have peace, God. You redeem the soul of your servants, and none who trust in you shall be desolate. From Ecclesiastes, we're taught the kol zman v'tol chevetz tachat hashamayim, eit laledet ve'eit lamut, eit latav ve'eit l'kor netuah, eit lifrotz ve'eit livnot, eit livkot ve'eit lizchok, eit svod ve'kod ishlich chavanif kohanin, eit lechavok v'chot mechavek, eit levakesh ve'abed, eit lishmor v'ashlich, eit likrov ve'eit litpor, achashot ve'eit letaber. For everything, there's a season, a time for every experience under heaven. A time to be born, and yes, a time to die. Time to plant and a time to uproot that which is planted. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to grieve and a time to dance. A time to throw stones, a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to discard. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. Although we're filled with an overwhelming sense of silence in the midst of such loss, so is it words that we turn to that truly remind us of a life well lived. And who better to do that than some of his family? And so I ask one of Jerry's children, Donna, to come forward and share these words on behalf of herself and her family.
Those of you who know me well know that public speaking is not one of my strong suits. But as we anticipated what was happening with my dad, and knowing how beautifully my brothers and my sister expressed themselves, they wrote beautiful words of tribute that they've shared with Rabbi. And I started to write too, knowing that I thought my brothers would speak, and since that they felt so emotional, in time they decided it was best if Rabbi would just capture their words. And what I learned about myself this week that I never knew is that perhaps I am more like my dad than I ever realized in that regard. He was very composed in difficult circumstance. And so I find myself wanting to do this when this was never something I enjoyed doing. And I want to just express before I start that on behalf of my mom and my brothers and their beautiful spouses and my sister and Alvin, and my Uncle Seymour, Aunt Marlene, my Uncle Bill, my Aunt Terry, and my dear Aunt Ro and Uncle Marty, my dad's sister who lives in California and found it very difficult to travel, who would have wanted to be here in the worst way. On behalf of all of our family, for those of you that have been in this position, we now understand what it feels like to be supported by all of you and how much it means to us, truly. Your words, your calls, your visits, your messages, your texts, thank goodness for technology, and then for your presence here today. It just means everything to all of us. When my dad was in the prime of his career as a pathologist, he penned a phrase that he hung on a placard in his office, and it said, "I have known the cold touch of death much more than thee. The warmth of life is ecstasy." Our dad lived with gusto, with vigor, with appreciation, with wonder and with gratitude, and indeed ecstasy. He had an insatiable curiosity about the world and a desire to never stop learning. My dad was a multitasker before that word actually existed. It was not at all uncommon for him to have both a Bridge World magazine and a Scientific American open at the same time, all the while watching golf, the Rubik's Cube nearby, and eating peanuts, a favorite snack, right out of the jar. He enjoyed a challenging novel, an article on physics or space, but also his subscription to Playboy. That's not exactly PC anymore, but he was of that generation. Dad strived to do everything well, and he marveled at those who succeeded at mastering their interests or their talents. To that end, he was so proud of his kids and grandkids, we knew it. He didn't care what career path we all chose, but he did care deeply that we demonstrated commitment to our work, that we studied, that we worked hard. He did care that we were educated. He cared that we spoke well and with decorum. My dad felt that cursing was inelegant and a sign of ignorance, and his kids and grandkids sometimes were inelegant. And we're sorry, Dad, if we offended you. My dad was very well read. There wasn't a topic he couldn't intelligently converse about, whether politics, literature, history, weather patterns, geography, science, he knew it all. As a kid, my dad read the dictionary and the Encyclopedia Britannica because he just was interested. He would have loved competing with James on Jeopardy had he felt well enough in recent weeks. My dad was a closeted showman, if you knew him well, and a man of humor. He loved to dance, he loved to sing, he could tell a joke. He enjoyed many a dance with my mom. He held her close doing the foxtrot or some other step I could never follow. Slow, quick, quick, he would say if he tried to teach me. But holding my mom close was his favorite. He loved belting out a show tune while playing the piano. He adored listening to his grandson Daniel play in a way that he could not, and he delighted in watching Steve perform in his song and dance group. He even managed to sing a few tunes for the nurses during his hospitalization last November. He especially loved reading children's books in animated voices. I remember him doing that with me. He did it with his grandchildren, and most recently with his great-grandkids. There was a book from Sesame Street, and my dad in particular enjoyed reading that book about Grover, who tried to forewarn everybody as each page was turned, don't turn the page, there will be a monster at the end of this book. My dad would say, don't turn that page, in his favorite Grover voice. And then he would whisper to the kids, turn the page, turn the page. And then the kids would laugh, and he would laugh, and his dimple would show, and it was pure magic. Ask my son Sam to show you the video. He recently filmed my dad reading to his kids not very long ago. My dad's declining health in the past 6 months frequently prompted a caregiver to ask if he was comfortable. In true dad form, he would reply, I make a good living. If they insisted Jerry lay down or Jerry lay down, he would quickly correct them. It's lie down. Chickens lay eggs, people lie down. That was my dad, joking one moment, educating the next. In his last days of life, with weak voice, he said to my mom, sorry, Mom, if I make you cry. I want to do something, he said to her. What do you want to do, she asked him. I want to go dancing, he said. I'm happy that that was one of his final thoughts, of dancing with his love. My dad deeply loved his children and grandchildren, and of course, my mom. My dad was not a kissy, huggy dad. He preferred in later years to do a fist bump or an elbow bump during flu season, but we kids were nevertheless secure in how much he loved us. He adored his siblings and really kept in touch with them in a way that so many don't, despite, for some of them, many, many miles between them. He adored his nieces and nephews, his cousins in Toronto, his lifelong friends. He did not have superficial relationships with any of them, despite there being so many people in his life. He followed their careers, their interests, their families, and enjoyed real conversations of depth with all of them. It's no wonder that we've received such beautiful words of comfort from so many of you, and that you join us in our sadness over my dad's death, for he was a force, was a real presence in all our lives, and we will carry on for him.
Thank you, Donna. It was beautiful. I do have tomes of stories that have been emailed and expressed to me over the past couple of days, and I must say I'm humbled to be able to put them together to honor this man, to help pay tribute to Jerry. 4 questions are asked according to Jewish tradition before we're allowed entrance into the world to come into Olam Haba. And according to your answer, then, if they're affirmative, you're welcomed in. 1, were you ethical in your work, in your business dealings? 2, did you enjoy all the permitted pleasures of this world? 3, did you study? Were you learning constantly in your life? And 4, did you have hope? And hearing and understanding even more of Jerry Mandell's life, we can be assured of his immediate admission. For it was not just that he could answer these questions affirmatively, but that they were actually his life, his mantra, and how he tackled every part of his living. From the simplicity of even contemplating the thought of pocketing a few Band-Aids from the hospital lab to bring home, as B may have asked him to do, proclaiming, we have 5 children, for God's sakes. We go through Band-Aids like water. And Jerry would respond that they could afford to buy them. He would not take hospital supplies home. Or maybe that ethical core could be seen so readily through his golf game. I found this to be expressed so well through his son Michael's words. He was a better than average golfer. Not only did he enjoy playing the game, he loved watching it on TV, practicing. He thought so highly of the game, he'd even judge the character of an individual based upon their approach, their demeanor, and their play. If you ever played a round of golf with Jerry, you were judged. If you moved the ball to gain advantage, you were a cheat and could not be trusted. If you walked in his line, you were inconsiderate. If you went for the impossible shot when the odds dictated to play safely, then you were just not that smart. If you slammed your club into the ground in disgust, you were hot-headed. If you had no idea what they were doing out there, then you were not only not that smart, but not very cultured. But if you were good, if you were really, really good, well, then he held you in the highest esteem, for you had conquered something that Jerry Mandell never completely could. That said, Jerry's game was good, as evidence he had 3 holes in 1, and probably carried a 10 handicap. But again, for me, it goes to that question of his ethics, and to that, he was unflinching. That second question, did he enjoy all the permitted pleasures of this world? To that, there's no doubt. Most especially the food, particularly anything his bee was making. He relished and savored food as he did life, from the simple, yes, the peanuts, the black licorice, the dark chocolate, an occasional stiff drink, or as one of his grandsons observed, remarkably, Jerry enjoyed a 5-course meal out of 1 bowl. Why dirty another dish? Rather spend the time and energy enjoying what there was to be enjoyed. Question 3, did he study? Was he learning? No doubt a lifelong student of just about everything. He relished learning. He relished learning of life, needed to know and to understand, whether it was devouring a medical journal or replaying a bridge hand over and over in his head, or teaching himself to play the piano, classical, of course, to start, or it was his nightly battle with Jeopardy, staying sharp all the time. Living was about learning, something everyone in his family knew and had been motivated and challenged with throughout your lives. Or the way he played with numbers. It was the way his brain worked. So Sudoku and Pinochle and cribbage, all learning, all numbers. And finally, that 4th question, did he have hope? Well, there's no doubt Jerry filled his cup with hope. An eternal optimist who, despite a challenge, could always see possibility, never complaining, never seeming to be in a bad mood, even last Sunday, a time when he could barely move. But seeing the sun shining brightly on a beautiful spring day, asked, "Where's my putter?" As if in his mind he was ready to go out golfing. Always that sense of humor. More than anything, it was that zest for living. And always hoping that there was more time because there was, yes, more to do. Nearly 15 years ago, he lived that mission. As his son Steve wrote, he was driving and sneezed and feeling a tearing pain in his chest like he had never felt before. As a pathologist and physician, he immediately diagnosed himself with a ruptured aorta and drove himself to the ER. Because he looked so good and his blood pressure was stable, they didn't believe him, but he insisted. After some delay, transferred to another hospital, his diagnosis was confirmed, and he was rushed immediately into surgery. Upon hearing of the diagnosis, the family was shocked. A ruptured aorta, particularly an ascending aorta, typically results in death 90% of the time, often immediately, dramatically. For the 10% that do initially survive, about 90% of those will have some residual deficit, which can be significant: stroke, paralysis, memory loss. We were not sure what we were going to find when we came out of surgery, but not Jerry. He was present and aware and okay. And since that time, Jerry sopped up the joy of life with great appreciation, just like before, I suppose, but it meant more because he felt like he was given some overtime in his life. In other words, he had hope. He knew there was more. Jerry's son Marshall wrote, "If you were lucky enough to know my dad, you knew that you were in the presence of someone who is ideally good, happy to be alive, that he'd go out of his way to help you or make anyone's life better. Jerry Mandell was a giver, he was a lover, he was faithful, honest, and true, a stellar father and husband, a leader and a patriarch. He set an example of how to live and be happy, and although he had plenty to talk about, he was a listener. He searched endlessly for knowledge. He was dedicated to the improvement of the human race and of the universe. He was strong and smart enough to see who he was and continue to grow and gain insight into himself and others throughout his life. He loved his family and Mom dearly, and he would have been pleased to see each one of you here today, and he would have greeted you all warmly." Yes, that was Jerry. Born 90 years ago, from the earliest of days, instilled within him was the value and the importance of family. With his siblings Seymour and Marlene, Roe and Marty, and Bill and Terry, our condolences go to all of you as well. For how significant were your relationships with your brother and with your children. From the start, Jerry was adored by all, especially by your parents. That everyone saw, articulating at a very early age his desire to help others at 6. After having his adenoids removed and while still in the hospital, Jerry made a commitment to become a doctor. Who actually does what they said they were going to do at the age of 6, or 12, or 18 for that matter? God knows I'd be a veterinarian. No offense if any are out there. Yes, he fulfilled that mission, eventually becoming chief of staff at Sinai Hospital. Here's what Steve saw in his father, the doctor. Dad cared greatly for his staff and employees and was a valued leader, teacher, mentor, leading the School of Medical Technology for over a decade. Dad's laboratory and leadership teams were like the United Nations, as Dad understood the value of workplace diversity long before it was fashionable. In his team of 9 pathologists, 4 nationalities were represented, 5, if you include the U.S., 4 different religions. He knew everybody on his lab staff of over 200 personally and would commonly ask after their parents, their spouses, their children by name. Dad taught me the important concept of leading by walking around, being available and visible and connected to the people who worked for you, as in the end you were all on the same team working for the same success. And as a result, he worked hard for his employees like a prideful teammate, and they in turn worked hard and were always loyal to him. Steve continued, in my years as a high school and college student, I had many opportunities to spend time in my dad's office at Sinai and study or waiting for a ride home, and found myself surrounded by book-bound volumes of reports representing decades of Sinai Hospital's autopsy reports performed by my dad and other pathologists, and summarizing the clinical history and post-mortem examination findings of thousands of patients who had died in the hospital. It was fascinating to me. Before long, my curiosity led me to start reading these. I learned a tremendous amount of terminology in medicine and pathology, reading the summaries, and these undoubtedly informed my knowledge and subsequent career choice to pursue medicine and become a pathologist. But at the time, I realized there was more in these pages than just medical findings, especially in reading my dad's reports. You see, while other reports would start out with a typical, and excuse the blunt description in the setting, with a typical, the body is that of a 64-year-old white woman with a 35-year-old history of poorly controlled diabetes, my dad's reports were always different. He would describe the same patient as Mrs. Maxwell, a mother of 6, retired automotive working, living in Livonia with her husband for the past 26 years, who suffered a 35-year history of poorly controlled diabetes. Her body is that of, and then a description would begin. It may seem like a small thing to you, but when you read thousands of reports and begin to see the pattern emerge over and over again, it leaves an impression on you. My dad was different than other pathologists, was likely different than many other surgeons or internists as well. He never saw a case in medical terms, never overlooked the person. He always saw another human being, a person with life experiences and family, a person not now cold and lifeless, but one who was once alive and replete with dreams and relationships and a life outside of their illness. He never knew these people in their lifetime, but he always looked for the life that had been within them now that they had passed. He could never forget the human story of each of his patients and was determined to document that in his reports as well, as what he may have been required to document medically. They died, he lived, so he told their story. There's no doubt that Jerry was an inspiration to 4 of his children who went into medicine, as well as his younger brother Bill, and many of his nephews and nieces. As Michael wrote, Jerry was the reason I went into medicine. As a young boy, I'd watch Jerry cut surgicals on some Saturdays. He'd pick up a specimen, activate the dictaphone with a foot switch, describe the tissue in front of him, What spewed forth was a whirlwind of years of study and dedication and wisdom whipped into a melody of masses and volumes and textures and colors that to a 12-year-old boy, who, by the way, came to work with his father only because they were going bowling afterwards, found nothing short of inspiring. It was that first time I watched my dad speak into that dictaphone that I decided I, too, wanted that same wisdom, that same competence. I wanted to be like my dad. When Jerry retired, one of his lab supervisors cried at the podium because she felt there would be no boss like him. She claimed he was easy to talk to. He always had an open door policy, was willing to listen and problem solve together. Never had she worked with someone so caring. Of course, this commitment to his work, this balance he was able to create in life, well, all this was made possible because of the life that Jerry created with his bee. Married for over 66 years, together more than 70. When you first met at the Open Club meeting, Jerry was 19 and you, Bee, were just shy of 17. On your first date, Jerry was already singing to you. As you sat on his lap and he intoned, "I want to get you on a slow boat to China." When he got into medical school, he told you he probably wouldn't be able to see you very often, but that wasn't the case. Every week, two of you still found time to be together. Within 3 years, you were engaged, a year later married. After finishing medical school, it was off to the Air Force, where Jerry became a captain. Proud he was of his service. With any holiday, whether it be July 4th or Memorial Day, an American flag would fly from his home. You shared that with him, Bee. He opened up his life, his interests to you, teaching you to appreciate and love classical music as he did, sharing in your families. So your siblings were so much a part of his family as were their families over the years. For Bernice and Marty of blessed memory, for Flo and Lucky, how many memories created for your families together, for all of the cousins. How many posts have I seen on Facebook this past few days from Mandells and Hollanders and Blocks? And so many have spoken of. Notice the beauty in the relationship between Jerry and Bee. It was an example to be emulated. It was a love that was genuine and authentic. You said, Bee, for all your years, never did you go to bed angry, for when you were, Jerry wouldn't let you. He made sure you talked. And in your words, he soothed you out of your anger. And in the end, as you would do every night, you'd say, "Good night, my love." And he would respond, "Sleep tight, honey." Marshall expressed it beautifully. Your relationship, Dad loved Mom wholly and dearly. She was his girlfriend, his lover, his wife, the mother of his children. He was true and faithful, responsible, and wanted nothing more than be by her side as they played golf and danced and ate and celebrated life with their family and their wealth of friends. Traveled to places together like Europe and Israel and Alaska. They had a comfortable place together where they would spend winters in Florida, which each had a sweet view overlooking a lake that sparkling like diamonds in the Florida afternoon sun. They were romantic to each other constantly as they grew older, and they would while away the afternoons reading and listening to their favorite music and just being happy together. Of course, it was the family you created that meant the world to you both. Marshall and Jenna, Ruth and Alvin, Donna and David, Steve and Lauren, and Michael and Melanie. Again, the words of Marshall. Dad was a great father in so many ways. He was fun, and he would always take some time out of his day and donate it to you if it was needed. He saw his role as a provider, an educator, a leader, took on these roles exceedingly well. He and Mom took education seriously and pretty much put all his kids through college and beyond. That was an absolute in our family. If you wanted something, it might happen. But if you needed something to advance your future or education, you got it as fast as the blink of an eye. He made sure and sacrificed so his children had the best food, the best clothes, the best education. He was never material with himself, but his children had to have the best that he and Mom could provide. And Dad only wore nice matching clothes because Mom made him wear those clothes. Dad and Mom supported their children and grandchildren with college funds, rent, whatever they needed. When I was in school in Boston and LA, Dad would send a monthly check along with a lengthy handwritten pen and ink letter on his stationery describing the going-ons of the family and the community. As busy as he was, he would take the time to sit and write long letters just because he knew it would make me happy. He was someone you always could rely on for any kind of support. He became a great role model to us kids, to his wonderful grandchildren who he adored and cherished. No doubt the pride Jerry had in you all, his children, and then his dividends, his grandchildren. That we all saw. From kvelling on the bima at B'nai Mitzvah or under a chuppah at weddings, surrounding you, being surrounded by you, and seeing you, this next generation, his grandchildren now living your lives, pursuing your passions, and doing it so well. For Keith, Shayna, Haley and Justin, Nick, David, Lindsay and Josh, Sam and Lindsay, Brian and Tess, Laura, Rebecca, Daniel, Juliet, and Dara. A man who had an amazing presence and was constantly present in your lives, who always had time for you each, and truly each of you felt and knew that you had a special connection with him. You saw the importance in relationships, in developing and maintaining them as he did all his years, not just with each of you, but with cousins who lived out of town. Jerry would pick up the phone and just call. And then, of course, he'd listen. Happy, content, whose very being brought this calm effect, the greatest of storytellers with voices and full commitment to get you invested with him in that book, especially for his grandchildren. Even creating videos when he was in Florida and you were younger, so he could still be reading with you when you weren't physically together. Lifting up within each of you a sense of passion and imagination and curiosity and interest always in learning, of course. To be involved and invested in this world, in life. And he didn't just say that to you. He showed you all it with his example, with his doing, with his being. And of course, the joy in seeing and knowing this next generation, his great-grandchildren, Shoshana, and Sadie, and Gabriel. That joy he exuded in being part of their lives. That was Jerry. Joy in his life and joy he felt in seeing all of his family's lives. Why those questions will be answered so easily, for there's no doubt with this man of his ethical core, his knowledge, his appreciation and relishing of life, and yes, his hope. And why he confidently told you not too long ago, his children, do not mourn my death, please celebrate my life. And that's what we will do. Yes, there's sadness in this loss, and what's physically not a part of this world anymore, but there's so much that this man gifted us, so much good that he left, and in so doing we know he very much still is a part of our world. At the end of his life, Donna, he called you forward, thought maybe it was him, his willingness to let go, but no, he said, I just want you to tell me about the children and grandchildren. How true that was with Jerry. If we are to be authentic in honoring him, it's exactly what we'll continue to do. In telling the stories to one another. There are so many of this man. And in doing so, Jerry Mandell will still very much be a part of our world, a part of our lives, a part of our beings, and a part of who we are. And with that, we understand Adonai Natan. God has given a gift in his life. And even though we yearn and wish for more, we say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mavarach. Blessed be the name of our God. As we rise now together, standing alongside the mourners, asking God to protect Jerry's soul.
אל מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה עם קדושים וטהורים את נשמת יעקב חנך בן צבי מנשה ופגה שהלך לעולמו. בעל הרחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your presence to Yaakov Chanak ben Zvi Menashe Vefega, to our beloved Jerry Mandell, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings. Let his soul be bound in the bond of everlasting life. For you, the eternal God, are his inheritance. May he rest in peace. Let us say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, just a reminder, there will be no procession to the cemetery, but everyone is welcome to join the family for the interment service. And at this time, if we can have the pallbearers please step forward.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside the still waters, restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.